A lot of movies get buried unfairly, but some films don't need defending. These are the ones that earn the backlash. Let's take a look. In 1982, Spielberg had already nailed the Alien family movie, so the rest of Hollywood rushed to copy it. Mac and Me is what happens when you do that 6 years too late and swap genuine emotion for corporate branding. McDonald's is everywhere. Coca-Cola shows up constantly. The main character's name is Mac, as in Big Mac. The premise is deliberately familiar. A lonely kid in a wheelchair befriends an alien who crash lands on Earth. The government starts chasing the alien family, so they steal a camper van and hit the road, trying to get them home. It's meant to be sweet, but almost nothing works. The aliens look like stiff green puppets with barely moving faces, and the illusion never holds. And for a kids' movie, it gets weird fast, including a supermarket panic where the alien dad grabs a gun and it spirals into a shootout. Critics tore it apart. The Los Angeles Times called it E.T., left in a sticky wrapper under a heater for 2 hours. The Washington Post rewrote E.T., phone home, as E.T., call a lawyer. Rotten Tomatoes sits at 7%, and Metacritic gives it 26 out of 100. The movie later picked up a cult following, not because it's good, but because people enjoy making fun of it. Menahem Golan, one half of the creative force behind Cannon Films, briefly stepped away from the cheap action movies that defined the studio to make something ambitious. The Apple was meant to be a polished, high-profile sci-fi musical, designed to cash in on what still looked like the hottest trend of the late 70s, disco. Instead, it became one of the most spectacular miscalculations of the decade. The timing couldn't have been worse. Disco was already on its way out, and to make things even stranger, the movie treats disco as the music of the villains. The very genre it was trying to sell is framed as corrupt and morally rotten. The film ends up biting the hand it hoped would buy a ticket. That confusion carries over to the cast. On release, the film was widely panned. It was nominated for Worst Picture and won awards for Worst Director and Worst Special Effects. Reviews described it as tasteless and painfully misguided. The only element that consistently earns praise is the production design. Howard the Duck still has its fans, and the decision to take a chance on a little-known Marvel character was genuinely bold and deserves some credit. But none of that changes the fact that the film was both a critical and commercial failure, and a very strange one at that. Released in 1986, it was meant to be a quirky sci-fi comedy. Instead, it turned into a tonal mess that never figured out who it was for. The humor rarely lands, the action scenes are awkward, and the sexual tension between Howard and Lee Thompson's character, a choice that still makes audiences cringe decades later. George Lucas, who served as executive producer, later called the project one of his career regrets. Anyway, the backlash was immediate. The Razzies gave the movie 7 nominations, and it walked away with 4 wins, including Worst Picture. What do you do when you want to make a Gremlins movie but don't have the rights, the budget, or any recognizable actors willing to sign on? You make Hobgoblins. At least that's what director Rick Sloan did. He was a fan of grindhouse movies, and Joe Dante and Hobgoblins is his attempt to copy that energy. Small demonic creatures escape from a vault on an old studio lot and start causing chaos. In theory, that could have worked as a cheap parody, but it doesn't. Instead of leaning into satire, Hobgoblins plays everything straight with a script so bad it makes killer clowns from outer space look refined. The acting is awful, the dialogue is painful, and the creatures look like bargain bin Halloween props. There's no tension, no humor, and no understanding of why Gremlins worked at all. Today, Hobgoblins is best known for being featured on Mystery Science Theater 3000, and that's pretty much the extent of its legacy. Heartbeeps came out in 1981, and feels like the result of a very specific studio assumption. After the success of Star Wars, executives apparently decided that audiences, especially kids, liked robots. So the next step seemed obvious. They made a romantic comedy about two consumer robots who fall in love and run away together. It's aimed at a family audience but never connects with one. Director Alan Arkush later admitted there was a fundamental mismatch. He was trying to make a sincere romantic film, while the studio wanted something broader and more overtly comic. That split shows on screen. The movie never commits to being sweet, funny, or adventurous, and ends up stuck somewhere in between. The cast couldn't save it. Andy Kaufman starred opposite Bernadette Peters in what became his final theatrical film role. Stan Winston's makeup work was strong enough to earn an Oscar nomination in the very first year the category existed. None of that translated into a movie people actually wanted to watch. Critics were brutal. Rotten Tomatoes sits at 0%. Vincent Canby of the New York Times called it unbearable. Supergirl came out in 1984 as a spin-off that doubled down on exactly the wrong instincts behind the later Superman films. After the success of Superman and Superman 2, producers leaned further into camp, silliness, and broad fantasy, the same approach that had already damaged the franchise with Superman 3. The story barely holds together. Argo City somehow survives Krypton's destruction and ends up in a vaguely defined sixth dimension. An ancient power source is lost. A witch gets hold of it on Earth, and Kara follows it there, only to spend a surprising amount of time enrolling in a boarding school and drifting into a romance, while the fate of her home supposedly hangs in the balance. Basic questions go unanswered, and major elements of Supergirl's comic book origin are either altered or ignored entirely. Much of the criticism focused on tone and execution. Reviewers called the script incoherent, the pacing sloppy, and the effects embarrassingly weak even by early 80s standards. Visible wires, flat matte work, and cheap-looking sets made the film feel small instead of magical. Faye Dunaway's villain performance was widely mocked for extreme overacting, turning what should have been a serious threat into unintentional parody. The film picked up multiple Razzie nominations and quickly earned a reputation as one of the weakest entries in the Superman film series. By 1987, the damage was already done, and Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, finished the job. Since its release, the film has become a running joke. The budget was slashed, action scenes were visibly cut down, and the effects barely passed television standards. Christopher Reeve pushed hard for an explicit anti-nuclear message. And while the intention was sincere, the execution was clumsy and heavy-handed. Whatever ambition was left was buried under compromises. The Superman series bottoms out here, reads the critics' consensus. The action is boring, the special effects look cheaper, and none of the actors appear interested in where the plot's going. The fallout was real. Superman didn't get another solo theatrical film for 19 years.